Medieval Mysteries.
The Medieval World is our new series on food history and mystery, with most attention on Europe. Of course, most world history books focused on the civilized world, with the dinky countries on the western fringe getting most of the attention.
How mysterious was it?
The Middle Ages lasted 1,000 years, from fleeing Romans and Germans until the Renaissance. There was a written record of much of it. But what about the disappearing Vandals, Visigoths, or Jutes, or even King Arthur? Let's look at the map again.
This is Europe around the year 1000. There are big changes in progress. In the southwest is the Caliphate of Cordoba and the Abbasid Caliphate in the southeast. Islam was on the move. Bulgaria was a militaristic empire. A shrinking Byzantine Empire was caused in part by the Muslim advances. Then the strange Holy Roman Empire. As Voltaire said, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Interesting stories, mostly bad. How important was Christianity?
Christianity spread across Europe, and the church became a dominant power. Benefits included Gothic cathedrals, alms for the poor, and indulgences sold to the super rich. Universities were a European tradition, beginning with the University of Bologna in 1088. A major downside was the Inquisition. What was it called? The Dark Ages?
People fleeing Rome knew the Roman Empire fell. People had to feed their families just like before, not giving much thought to faraway empires. It took Italian poet Petrarch in the 14th century to call it the Dark Ages. A later bishop called it Middle Times. Then Middle Ages was used by the early 17th century. Why were there monasteries?
Somehow, hermits living in the desert led to monasteries, eventually becoming another bastion of culture and learning and accumulated wealth. Once again, guilty elites paid for salvation. Monasteries became major food producers, employing common folk to do much of the work. How did feudalism develop?
Farmers fled, then squatted on abandoned land. Sooner or later, warlords on horseback rode through, claiming ownership of the land and the squatters. The warlords swore allegiance to the duke, and the duke to the king, and the feudal system was created and standardized. The farmers discovered they were serfs bound to the land with major obligations to their lord. Ditto the lord of the duke, providing goods and services, including a new group of professional fighters called knights. What happened to cities?
Cities remained and new ones were built. They usually were chartered by the king with some autonomy and rights. They became centers for markets and trade, plus religious centers. Specialists like bakers, butchers, and brewers developed into guilds, usually chartered by the cities. They had self-protecting rights and a monopoly privilege, with some protections for the customer. This definitely was not capitalism.
Why were there wars?
The attitudes of prospective god emperors have not changed since antiquity and the Middle Ages. Wars were, and still are, destructive, expensive, and deadly. But victory meant expanding the kingdom, more power, wealth, and high praise, plus glorious statues and magnificent tombs. Were the Crusades bad?
We'll say really bad. Pope Urban II called for a crusade to reclaim the holy sites then under Muslim control. Venice and other Italian city states made a killing transporting crusaders and supplies to the Holy Land. The Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1098. A side trip in a later crusade was the sacking of Byzantine capital Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire would fall to the Ottoman Turks. The good news? Crusader elites were introduced to the food and spice luxuries of the Orient. They wanted more, and the Italian merchants were happy to oblige for a huge markup.
Wasn't the Renaissance a good thing?
Well, more or less. Super rich Italian merchants and bankers, plus popes, hired talented artisans like Leonardo and Michelangelo. Italian diplomat Machiavelli understood the ruthlessness and duplicity of the elites, described in his classic political work, The Prince. Okay, progress, but benefiting the pompous and powerful. Now, Italy is a tourist destination, in part because the art and architecture is available to the public.
What about the poor peasants?
No, we didn't forget about them. They were the serfs at the bottom, providing the food surpluses needed to fuel the feudal system. First key point: cold weather, floods, plagues, and starvation were common events. Second key point: it wasn't a meritocracy. Serfs remained serfs. On to our medieval tour.
Well, our next video will be a medieval history tour with a major simplification of 1,000 years of events. There must be some mention of Charlemagne and William the Conqueror. That's next up on Food, History, and Mystery.